I never thought I'd be starting over at 35, but here I am, Dr. Tessa Thompson, dentist and soon-to-be business owner. It's been 3 years since I married Mike, a mechanical engineer, 5 years my senior. We live in my apartment. He says he left his to his ex-wife after their divorce. I don't know much about that part of his life, and I've never pushed. Our life together has been good, for the most part. I make a comfortable living as a dentist, but I've always dreamed of more. That's why I've been squirreling away every extra penny, denying myself little luxuries. My goal? Opening my own private practice. You should do it, Tessa, Mike said one evening as we sat on our worn couch, the TV droning in the background. You'd be great at running your own business. I looked at him, surprised by his enthusiasm. You really think so? He nodded, taking a swig of his beer. Absolutely. My wife, the business owner. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? I couldn't help but smile. It did sound nice. It'll be a lot of work, I warned him. And money. We'll have to tighten our belts for a while. Mike waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry about that. We'll make it work. I'll support us for the first year while you get things up and running. You just focus on making your dream come true. His words filled me with warmth. This was why I loved him, his unwavering support, his belief in me. Okay, I said, my mind already racing with plans. Let's do this. The next few months were a whirlwind. I quit my job at the clinic, throwing myself headfirst into preparations. There was so much to do, getting licenses, finding the right location, renovations, equipment. Every day brought new challenges, new decisions to make. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime of preparation, my office was ready. I stood in the doorway, taking in the gleaming equipment, the fresh paint smell, the neatly arranged waiting area. This was mine. All mine. As I locked up that first night, a mix of excitement and terror churned in my stomach. Tomorrow, I'd open my doors to my first patients. I was on my own now, sink or swim. The first few months of running my own dental practice were a whirlwind. I worked 7 days a week, from dawn till dusk, barely stopping to eat or sleep. My office became my second home, scratch that, my first home. I saw more of my dental chair than I did of my own bed. Dr. Thompson, your next patient is ready, my receptionist, Lisa, would say, poking her head into my office. I'd nod, gulping down the last of my cold coffee. Thanks, Lisa. Send them in. And so it went, day after day. Fillings, crowns, root canals, I did it all. When I wasn't with patients, I was buried in paperwork, learning the ins and outs of running a business. It was exhausting, but exhilarating too. This was my dream, after all. Mike and I became like ships passing in the night. When I left for work, he was still asleep. When I got home, he was already in bed. We communicated through hastily scribbled notes and brief text messages. How's work? I texted one day, during a rare quiet moment. Fine, came the reply, hours later. I frowned at my phone. That was it? Just fine? But before I could dwell on it, Lisa was calling me for another patient, and thoughts of Mike were pushed to the back of my mind. Weeks turned into months. I was so focused on my practice that I barely noticed the changing seasons. Spring became summer, summer faded into fall. I was making progress, slowly but surely. My patient list was growing, and I was starting to see some regulars. You're doing great, Dr. Thompson, Mr. Johnson, one of my first patients, said during a checkup. This place is really coming along. I beamed at him. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. That means a lot. But for every high, there was a low. The stress was constant, the pressure immense. There were nights I'd come home and cry, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But then I'd think of how far I'd come, how much I'd invested, and I'd pull myself together. I couldn't give up now. One particularly grueling day, I stumbled home well past midnight. The apartment was dark and quiet. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the couch, too tired to make it to the bedroom. That's when my phone rang. I groaned, fumbling for it in the dark. Who could be calling at this hour? Tessa, is that you? It was Mike's mother, Ellen, her voice tight with worry. I sat up, suddenly alert. Yes, it's me. What's wrong? I've been trying to reach Mike all day, Ellen said. He's not answering his phone. I'm worried sick. There's been some kind of scandal at his work. My heart dropped. Scandal? What scandal? I'm sorry, I don't know anything about this, I said, my mind racing. I haven't really talked to Mike in a while. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Oh, Mike's mother said, her voice small. I see. Well, if you hear from him, please ask him to call me. Of course, I promised. I'll talk to him as soon as I can. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, my exhaustion forgotten. What was going on with Mike? How could there be a scandal at his work that I knew nothing about? I found Mike in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. He looked up when I entered, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. We need to talk, I said, my voice sounding strangely calm, despite the turmoil inside me. Your mom called. She said there was some kind of scandal at your work. What's going on, Mike? He let out a long, shaky breath. I quit my job, Tessa. About a month ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. A month? You've been unemployed for a month and you didn't tell me? I didn't want to upset you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You've been so busy with the practice, I didn't want to add to your stress. I stood up, pacing the room as I tried to process this information. So what happened? Your mom mentioned a scandal. Mike ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was uncomfortable. I had a fight with my boss. He was being unreasonable, demanding more and more overtime without compensation. I stood up to him, things got heated, and I walked out. My pride wouldn't let me stay. I wanted to yell, to shake him, to demand why he thought his pride was more important than our financial stability. But looking at him, slumped and defeated, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I sat back down beside him. What are you going to do now? I asked softly. Mike shrugged. I don't know. I think I might be suffering from burnout. I'd been thinking about seeing a psychologist, maybe taking a short break from work to figure things out. Part of me wanted to scream that we couldn't afford a break, that I was already working myself to the bone trying to keep my new practice afloat. But I swallowed those words. Mike needed support, not criticism. Okay, I said, taking his hand. If that's what you need, we'll make it work. But Mike, you have to promise me something. No more secrets. I need to know what's going on in your life, good or bad. Okay? Mike nodded, squeezing my hand. Okay, I promise. I'm sorry, Tessa. I should have told you sooner. The next day, I called the clinic where I used to work and asked if they had any part-time positions available. It was a step backward, but we needed the extra income. As I hung up the phone, having secured the part-time position, I looked at Mike. He was on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. I got the job, I said. I start next week. He just nodded in response, as if it was something that was taken for granted. The next few months were a blur of exhaustion and stress. I'd wake up at dawn, see patients at my office until early afternoon, then rush to the clinic for my part-time shift. By the time I got home each night, I was dead on my feet. Mike, true to his word, started seeing a psychologist. He talked about burnout and needing time to recuperate. I tried to be supportive, but it was hard not to feel resentful as I watched him lounging on the couch while I worked myself to the bone. One evening, about 3 months after Mike had quit his job, I came home to find him in an unusually good mood. Tessa, he exclaimed as I trudged through the door. I've got great news. I got a job. It's with that engineering firm downtown. I start next week. Relief washed over me. Finally, things were looking up. That's wonderful, Mike, I said, managing a tired smile. We should celebrate. And celebrate we did. I splurged on a bottle of wine, and for the first time in months, we sat down to a meal together, talking and laughing like we used to. It felt good, like maybe we were getting back on track. But my relief was short-lived. A month into his new job, Mike came home fuming. I quit, he announced, throwing his briefcase onto the couch. I froze, the plate I was washing slipping from my hands and clattering into the sink. What? Why? The boss is a tyrant, Mike spat. He wants complete control over everything. I'm not some puppet he can order around. So what now? I asked when he finally paused for breath. He shrugged. I'll find something else. Something better. A job where they appreciate my skills and give me the freedom I deserve. I wanted to scream. To shake him and ask if he appreciated my skills, if he understood the freedom I'd given up to keep us afloat. But I didn't. I just nodded, turned back to the dishes, and tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. The weeks that followed were tense. Mike spent his days at home, supposedly job hunting, while I continued my grueling schedule. But more and more often, I'd come home to find him playing video games or watching TV. Any luck with the job search? I'd ask. Nothing suitable yet, he'd reply, not looking away from the screen. These companies just don't get it. I need something challenging, you know? With good pay and flexible hours. Then one day, Mike started talking about having children. Wouldn't it be great to have a little one running around? He said over breakfast. I could stay home and take care of the kid while you work. It's the perfect solution. I stared at him, my coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips. Mike, we can barely afford our current lifestyle. How could we possibly support a child? He waved his hand dismissively. We'll figure it out. You're doing great with your practice, and I'll find something eventually. Come on, Tessa, don't you want to be a mom? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course I wanted children, someday. But not like this. Not when our marriage was hanging by a thread and our financial situation was so precarious. I think we need to focus on getting our lives in order first, I said carefully. Maybe when things are more stable. Mike's face fell. You just don't understand, he muttered. You're always so focused on work, you can't see what's really important. His words stung, but I didn't have the energy to argue. I just got up, rinsed my mug, and headed out to another long day of work. As the months dragged on, the tension in our household grew thicker. Mike's job search had become sporadic at best, and he spent more and more time immersed in his video games. I was exhausted, stressed, and increasingly resentful. One evening, I came home to find Mike excitedly setting up a new gaming console. What's this? I asked, my voice tight. He grinned, not noticing my tone. Just got the latest system. The graphics are incredible. I felt my temper flare. And how exactly did you pay for this? Mike's smile faltered. I took some money from our joint account. But don't worry, it's an investment in my hobby. Once I start working again, I'll pay it all back. The argument that followed was ugly. Months of pent-up frustration and resentment came pouring out. We said things we couldn't take back, reopened old wounds, and created new ones. From that day on, I stopped putting money into our joint account. I paid the bills myself and bought groceries as needed. Mike was furious, accusing me of not respecting him and infringing on his rights. I'm the man of this house, he yelled during one particularly heated argument. I should be managing our finances. I laughed bitterly. What finances, Mike? The money I earned that you spend on games and beer? The atmosphere at home became unbearable. We barely spoke, and when we did, it usually ended in an argument. I threw myself into my work even more, using it as an escape from the disaster my personal life had become. Then came the day that changed everything. I was at home, catching up on some paperwork, when I overheard Mike on the phone with his parents. His voice drifted from the bedroom, animated in a way I hadn't heard in months. "Yeah, I need a new business suit for this job interview," he was saying. "It's a great opportunity, but I'm a little short on cash right now. Could you maybe help me out?" I felt a spark of hope. Was Mike finally taking his job search seriously? But as I listened, that hope quickly turned to ash. "Thanks, Mom. I really appreciate it. I'll pay you back as soon as I get the job." The call ended, and I waited, expecting Mike to come share the news about his interview. But he didn't. Instead, I heard the familiar sounds of him booting up his computer. Curious and increasingly suspicious, I quietly made my way to the bedroom door. What I saw made my blood run cold. Mike was online, not browsing job listings, but purchasing a new computer game and ordering a case of beer for delivery. I couldn't believe my eyes. He had just lied to his parents, begged them for money under false pretenses, and now he was spending it on alcohol and games? "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, pushing the door open. Mike jumped, guilt flashing across his face, before quickly being replaced by defiance. "It's none of your business. This is my money." "Your money?" I was incredulous. "You just lied to your parents to get that money. They think you're buying a suit for a job interview." The argument that followed was the worst we'd ever had. Finally, red-faced and shaking with anger, Mike grabbed a bag and started throwing clothes into it. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice hoarse from yelling. "To my parents," he spat. "At least they support me." As the door slammed behind him, I sank to the floor, overwhelmed by a mix of anger, disappointment, and an odd sense of relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe. Days passed since Mike stormed out, and the apartment felt eerily quiet without him. On the fourth day, as I was finishing up with a patient, my phone buzzed. Mike's name flashed on the screen. My heart raced as I answered. "Hey, Tessa." Mike's voice was cheerful, as if nothing had happened. "I'm in Miami with my parents. Mom's always wanted to come here, so we decided to make a weekend of it." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "And how exactly are you paying for this trip?" There was a brief pause before Mike answered, his tone slightly less jovial. "Well, I had to borrow a couple of your credit cards. But don't worry. I'll pay you back many times over once I start this new job." I felt sick. "You took my credit cards without asking me?" "Come on, don't be like that," Mike said, his voice taking on that wheedling tone I'd grown to hate. "It's just for the weekend. I'll bring you back a nice shell from the beach, okay? Have a good weekend, honey." Before I could respond, he had hung up. In that moment, something inside me snapped. With shaking hands, I opened my banking app and blocked all my credit cards. Next, I called a locksmith. Within an hour, he was at my apartment, changing the locks. My final stop that day was a lawyer's office. I'd found her online, Sandra Patel, specializing in divorce law. "I want to file for divorce," I said, the words coming out easier than I'd expected. Sandra nodded, her expression compassionate but professional. "I understand, Dr. Thompson. We'll start the process right away. Can you tell me a bit more about your situation?" By the time I left her office, the divorce papers were being drawn up. As I stepped out onto the street, the late afternoon sun warming my face, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. The sun had long set when my phone rang again. Mike's name flashed on the screen, and I braced myself as I answered. "Tessa? Thank God you picked up." Mike's voice was frantic. "Something's wrong with the credit cards. They're not working, and we can't pay for anything here. Mom and Dad are freaking out." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "That's because I blocked them, Mike. I didn't give you permission to use my cards." There was stunned silence for a moment before Mike spoke again. "Look, I'm sorry, okay?" His tone shifted to pleading. We're already here on the coast. Can't you just unblock the cards? We'll sort everything out when we get back, I promise. I almost laughed at the familiarity of those empty promises. No, Mike. I'm done sorting things out for you. You've put me in impossible situations time and time again. Now you can figure this one out on your own. Tessa, please. He was begging now. You're putting me in such an awkward position. My parents are here, we have no way to pay, this is your problem too. No, Mike, I said firmly. This is your problem. You created it, now you solve it. Goodbye. The next day, I took a personal day from work. I spent the morning packing up Mike's belongings, trying not to get caught up in memories as I boxed up his clothes, books, and the various gadgets he'd accumulated over the years. Once everything was packed, I called a storage facility and arranged for his things to be kept there. A few days later, I was at work when my phone buzzed with a call from Mike. I stepped out of my office to take it. Tessa? I'm outside the apartment, but my key isn't working. Did you change the locks? He sounded incredulous. Yes, I did, I replied calmly. Mike, I've sent divorce papers to your parents' address. You should be receiving them soon. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Divorce papers? Tessa, you can't be serious. We can work this out, we always do. Not this time, I said, surprised at how steady my voice was. I packed up your things and sent them to a storage facility. I'll text you the details. Tessa, please, he begged. Let's start over. I'll change, I promise. Just give me one more chance. I closed my eyes, memories of all the last chances flashing through my mind. No, Mike. It's over. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be with me. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mix of emotions, sadness for the end of what we once had, relief that it was finally over, and a growing excitement for what the future might hold. For the first time in years, that future was entirely up to me. A few weeks after I'd sent Mike's belongings to storage, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. Tessa? It's Ellen, Mike's mother. I braced myself, expecting a tirade about ruining their Miami trip. But Ellen's voice was soft, almost apologetic. I owe you an apology, Tessa, she said, catching me off guard. I had no idea what Mike has been putting you through. As Ellen spoke, the pieces of Mike's past began to fall into place. She told me about Mike's first wife, how she'd left him due to his chronic irresponsibility. Ellen had hoped Mike had changed, that our marriage would be different. When we got back from Miami and I learned the truth, how he'd been lying to you, stealing your money, I was devastated, Ellen confessed. I kicked him out of the house. I couldn't enable his behavior anymore. I felt a wave of empathy for this woman who'd raised Mike, who'd hoped for the best for her son. It's not your fault, Ellen, I said softly. You didn't know. Still, I'm so sorry for what he's put you through, she replied. You didn't deserve any of it. After we hung up, I sat in silence, processing the conversation. It was oddly comforting to know that I wasn't alone in being disappointed by Mike. In the weeks that followed, Mike made several attempts to reconcile. He showed up at my office, flowers in hand, pleading for another chance. He waited outside my apartment, trying to catch me as I came home. Each time, I refused to engage. I knew now that he wouldn't change, that we'd end up in the same cycle if I let him back in. As time passed, I found myself settling into a new rhythm. Without Mike's expenses draining our accounts, I was able to focus fully on my practice. I left the part-time clinic job, pouring all my energy into my own office. I hired a marketing consultant, and soon my patient list was growing steadily. 6 months after filing for divorce, I hired 2 more dentists to help with the increased workload. It was a joy to see my little practice flourishing, to know that all my hard work was finally paying off. A year after Mike left, I made the final payment on my business loan. To celebrate, I booked a weekend trip to a nearby spa resort. something I'd always wanted to do but had never allowed myself to splurge on before. As I lounged by the pool, sipping a fruity cocktail, I marveled at how much my life had changed. Now, as I sit in my expanded office, looking over plans for a new wing to accommodate more specialists, I can't help but feel proud of how far I've come. The past 2 years have been a journey of self-discovery and growth. I've learned to value myself, to trust my instincts, and to never settle for less than I deserve. Who knows what the future might bring? For now, I'm content knowing that whatever comes next, I have the strength and wisdom to handle it. My story isn't over. In many ways, it feels like it's just beginning.
I'm a 28-year-old man, married to my wife, Sarah, who's 26. We've been together for 6 years, dating for 4 before getting married, and we've been planning to start a family soon. My relationship with my mother, who's 52, has always been complicated. She raised me and my younger brother Tim, 24, on her own after my dad left when I was 10 and Tim was 6. We struggled financially, and Mom worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, leaving me to care for Tim. I cooked meals and helped him with homework while she worked late. Despite our hardships, I admired her determination. As I grew up, I realized that my mom relied on me emotionally more than she should have. She talked to me about her work and personal problems, even when I was still a teenager. I felt like I had to be strong for her, taking on a lot of responsibility early in life. By the time I was 22 and had my first real job as an entry-level accountant, I started helping her financially. At first, it was small things like buying groceries or paying a bill, and I didn't think much of it. I felt it was my duty after all she'd done for us. When I met Sarah at 24, she worked as a nurse, and we clicked immediately. As we got serious, Sarah noticed how much I was helping my mom and expressed concern. She worried I was enabling my mom's dependence, but I dismissed it at the time, thinking Sarah didn't understand the situation. Over the next few years, as Sarah and I got engaged and married, my financial support for my mom increased. My income was growing, and there always seemed to be a new crisis: car repairs, medical bills. I just couldn't say no. Sarah and I had frequent discussions about it. She worried that my mom was taking advantage of my generosity, and that it might affect our future, especially with our plans to buy a house and start a family. A significant portion of my income was going to help my mom, but I assured Sarah that it was temporary, that Mom just needed help getting back on her feet. 6 months ago, everything shifted. My mom called me, crying, saying she was behind on rent and needed $2,000 to avoid eviction. Without thinking twice, I transferred the money. But a week later, I noticed a strange charge on my bank statement for an online casino. I usually didn't question her expenses, but something felt off this time. After digging into her transactions, I discovered she had used most of the money on gambling. I was furious. When I confronted her, she broke down, admitting she had developed a gambling problem over the past year. She claimed she was trying to win enough money to pay me back and become financially independent. I told her I couldn't continue supporting her if she was going to gamble the money away, and insisted she get help. She promised to stop gambling and seek help, and for a couple of months, things seemed to improve. She stopped asking for money, and I thought that tough love had worked. Sarah and I started refocusing on our future, looking at houses and discussing when to start trying for a baby. Then, last week, everything fell apart. Sarah came home from work visibly upset. My mom had called her at the hospital, accusing me of cheating with my ex-girlfriend Lisa. I hadn't spoken to Lisa in years, since we briefly dated in college long before I met Sarah. I was blindsided by the accusation, but what hurt most was that Sarah didn't know what to believe. My mom claimed to have proof in the form of text messages between Lisa and me. I gave Sarah my phone without hesitation, knowing I had nothing to hide. But the damage was already done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Sarah said she needed time to process everything and went to stay with her sister. Now, I'm trying to make sense of why my mom would do this. Is it revenge for cutting off her financial support? Has her gambling addiction driven her to such extremes? I'm caught in the middle, not knowing how to fix it. I love my mom, but I'm starting to see how toxic our relationship has been. At the same time, I'm terrified of losing Sarah, the woman I want to spend my life with. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since this all happened, and things have only gotten worse. Sarah hasn't come home, and we've barely spoken aside from a few texts. She's made it clear she's not ready to talk face to face. In one of her messages, she said she's unsure what to believe anymore. That hit me hard. After 6 years of trust, it's been shattered by my mom's lies, and I don't know how to rebuild it. I confronted my mom about the accusations. At first, she denied everything, saying she was only looking out for me. But the more I pressed her, the more her story unraveled. After hours of back and forth, my mom finally admitted she had made up the entire story. Her explanation: she believed Sarah was going to leave me eventually and thought she was protecting me by trying to break us up first. I was in disbelief. How could she do something so cruel? When I asked her, she couldn't seem to grasp the seriousness of her actions. It turned out she had fabricated the text messages she claimed to have. Using an old phone I'd given her years ago, she created fake conversations and showed screenshots to Sarah. The level of deception was staggering. I've decided to cut off all contact with my mom for now. She continues to call and text, alternating between apologies and trying to justify her actions, but I'm not responding. I need to focus on saving my relationship with Sarah. My brother Tim, surprisingly, has been a source of support. When I finally told him what happened, he wasn't as shocked as I expected. He revealed that he had stopped talking to Mom months ago after she borrowed money from him and gambled it away, just like she did with me. Tim shared some stories of his own that shed light on how manipulative our mom has been over the years. He mentioned times when she pitted us against each other or invented emergencies to get money or attention. Comparing notes with him has opened my eyes to the patterns in her behavior. I've been reflecting a lot on my relationship with my mom and realizing how much she's used guilt and emotional manipulation to keep me tethered to her. I'm angry at her, but also at myself for not seeing it sooner. Sarah had tried to warn me, but I wasn't ready to listen. A few days ago, Sarah's sister reached out to say that Sarah is still deeply hurt, but is considering talking things through. I'm hopeful, but I know there's no quick fix for this kind of betrayal. I've been thinking about what I want to say to Sarah when we finally talk. I'd want her to know I'm committed to setting clear boundaries with my mom and that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild our trust. But I'm scared it might be too late. In the meantime, I've been keeping busy. I've thrown myself into work, started therapy to work through my family issues, and even joined a support group for people with family members struggling with gambling addictions. It's been helpful to talk to others who understand what I'm going through. I'm also thinking about what my relationship with my mom might look like in the future, if we have one at all. I know I can't cut her off entirely. She's still my mom, and I worry about her. But I also know I can't keep enabling her behavior or letting her interfere in my life. This entire ordeal has made me realize how much I've neglected my own needs. I've always been focused on taking care of everyone else, and now, as I face the possibility of losing my marriage, I'm confronting some hard truths about the choices I've made. I hope Sarah will be willing to work through this with me, but I'm also preparing myself for the possibility that she won't. Either way, I know I have a lot of work to do on myself and my relationships. I just hope it's not too late to save the most important one. Update 2. It's been another month, and I wish I had better news. Sarah finally agreed to meet with me last week. We went for a walk in the park near our house, a place we used to spend a lot of time together. As soon as I saw her, I could tell something had changed. She seemed distant, avoiding eye contact. We made small talk about work and the weather, but it felt strange to discuss such mundane things with so much unresolved between us. Finally, Sarah got to the real reason for our meeting. She told me she'd been doing a lot of thinking. While she believed I hadn't cheated on her, the fact that my mom was able to cause such chaos in our relationship made her feel vulnerable. She feared that even if we reconciled, my mom would always be a problem in our lives. I reassured her that I'd cut off contact with my mom and was committed to maintaining strong boundaries. I told her about my therapy and the support group I joined. But Sarah said it wasn't just about my mom anymore. This situation had made her question whether we were truly right for each other. She brought up past arguments about my family and how she'd always felt like she came second. She said she still loved me, but she wasn't sure if love was enough to overcome all the issues we faced. Hearing Sarah say these things was incredibly painful. I wanted to argue, to tell her we could work through anything together, but I could see in her eyes that she had already made up her mind. Sarah suggested we take some time apart to think about what we truly want. She proposed a trial separation of 3 months. During this time, we would live separately and limit our contact. At the end of the 3 months, we would reassess and decide whether to work on our relationship or end it for good. I agreed to the separation, even though it was the last thing I wanted. It felt like I was losing my best friend and partner, but I knew that pushing Sarah to stay would only make things worse. We spent the next hour discussing the logistics. She would continue staying with her sister while I stayed in our apartment. We worked out how to manage our shared finances and agreed only to contact each other if absolutely necessary. As we said goodbye, Sarah hesitated, squeezed my hand, and told me she was sorry it had come to this. It took every ounce of strength not to break down right there. Since that meeting, I've been trying to focus on myself. I've continued therapy and picked up new hobbies to keep my mind occupied. I joined a local hiking group and have been spending more time outdoors, which has helped clear my head. Meanwhile, dealing with the fallout from cutting off contact with my mom has been another challenge. She's been spreading lies to family and friends, claiming Sarah left me because she couldn't handle our family. It's frustrating, but I'm trying to stay above it and not engage. Tim has kept me updated on our mom's situation, and apparently, she's still gambling and asking other family members for money. It's hard to hear, but it reassures me that setting boundaries was the right decision. As the days pass, I swing between hope and despair. Part of me believes this time apart will help Sarah see that we can overcome this obstacle together. But another part of me is terrified that she'll realize she's happier without me. For now, all I can do is focus on becoming a better version of myself. Whether Sarah and I end up together or not, I need to address my own issues and learn to set healthier boundaries. It's a tough journey, but I'm committed to seeing it through. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I'm writing this with a heavy heart. Sarah and I are officially separated. After the trial separation, we met to discuss our future, and it became clear that the trust between us had been irreparably damaged. We tried couples counseling for a few sessions, hoping a professional could help us work through our issues. We talked about the impact my mom's actions had on our relationship, but we also uncovered deeper problems that we had been ignoring. Sarah shared that she had always felt like she was competing with my family for my attention and loyalty. Even before the incident with my mom, she had been unhappy with how much of our resources, both financial and emotional, were being directed towards my family. I realized I had been so focused on trying to take care of everyone else that I had neglected my relationship with Sarah. I thought I was doing the right thing by helping my family, but now I see that it came at the cost of my marriage. After much discussion and soul-searching, we both agreed that the best thing for us was to go our separate ways. It was an incredibly difficult decision, but we both felt it was necessary for our individual growth and happiness. We've begun the process of dividing our assets and working out the logistics of our separation. It's been challenging, but we're trying to keep things amicable. We've agreed to minimal contact for now to give each other space to heal. As for my mom, I still haven't spoken to her since everything happened. Tim keeps me updated, and it seems she still doesn't grasp the gravity of what she did. She's convinced herself that I'll eventually forgive her and that things will return to normal. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. In the meantime, I've been focusing on rebuilding my life. I moved into a new apartment and am establishing new routines. Therapy is helping me work through my family issues, and I'm learning to set healthier boundaries. Work has been a welcome distraction, and I've taken on new projects at the accounting firm that keep me busy. I've also reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage. This journey has been full of ups and downs. Some days I feel optimistic about the future and excited about the possibilities ahead. Other days, the loneliness and regret hit hard, and I find myself missing Sarah and the life we had planned together. But I'm taking it one day at a time and focusing on personal growth. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I'm done letting other people's problems control my life. It's a painful lesson, but one I needed to learn. For now, I'm working on finding a balance between supporting my family and taking care of myself. It's not easy, but I'm committed to creating a healthier, more fulfilling life. The evening air was rich with the aroma of roasted chicken as Maria and I hosted a family dinner in our warm suburban home. The table was beautifully set, candles flickered gently, and a soft murmur of conversation filled the room. Our closest friends, Mike and Jenna, had joined us along with my mother, Eleanor. Maria, glowing with excitement, shared the news as we sat down to eat. "We're expecting a baby," she announced, her smile brighter than I had ever seen. Mike and Jenna cheered, raising their glasses in celebration. "That's wonderful news." Eleanor's voice carried a strained enthusiasm, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She reached out to pat Maria's hand, the gesture feeling hesitant. As the evening wore on, I noticed Eleanor's smile falter when she thought no one was watching. At one point, she whispered something to Maria, too quiet for me to hear, but I saw Maria's smile waver just for a second. The night was filled with laughter and stories, but as the sun set, Eleanor's mood seemed to darken. After dinner, as we cleared the table, Maria, tired from her pregnancy, excused herself and headed upstairs to rest. Eleanor followed, saying she needed to use the bathroom. Then came a loud thud, followed by a scream. My heart froze. I raced upstairs to find Maria crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, her face twisted in pain. Eleanor stood nearby, pale and trembling. "It was an accident, David," she slipped. She stammered, her hands shaking. Maria clutched her abdomen, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, David," she pushed me. She said this child should never have been conceived. As Mike dialed 911, Jenna and I rushed to comfort Maria. The sound of distant sirens echoed in the night, but the storm inside me was far louder. My mind struggled to process what had just happened, the horror of realizing the hatred my own mother had concealed. When the paramedics arrived, Maria was carefully placed on a stretcher, her hand gripping mine tightly. I made a silent vow as she was wheeled toward the ambulance. No matter what, I would protect my family. Eleanor watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable as the distance between us grew into a chasm I knew would never be bridged. In the sterile light of the hospital, I paced beside Maria's bed, the steady beeping of the monitor a small comfort that our unborn child was safe. The doctors reassured us Maria would physically recover, but the emotional wounds were harder to heal. The image of her falling, of Eleanor standing over her, haunted every quiet moment. A few days later, I returned home to gather some of Maria's belongings. In the attic, I stumbled upon a stack of old letters. As I read through them, the words on the pages made my stomach turn. They were from my mother, written to an old friend, filled with disdain for my marriage to Maria. She had expressed her desire to prevent the birth of her mixed-race grandchild, her words dripping with hatred. Armed with the letters, I confronted Eleanor. She sat in her usual chair by the fireplace, a book forgotten on her lap. Her eyes, once warm, were now cold barriers. I held the letters up, my hands shaking. Why, Mom? How could you? Eleanor took the letters, her hands trembling as she read aloud her own words. I did it for us, David. For our family's future. To protect our legacy. Our legacy? I nearly choked on the words. There is no legacy worth preserving if it's built on hate. Eleanor's face crumbled as she tried to reach out. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could change things, make you see. See what? That your prejudice is justified. My voice rose, incredulous. No, Mom. I can't let you hurt my family anymore. Eleanor's tears flowed as I turned to leave, her cries fading into the background as I packed a bag for Maria. The drive back to the hospital was a blur, the city lights flashing. As I grappled with the betrayal, word of what Eleanor had done began to spread through the community. Neighbors who once greeted her warmly now crossed the street to avoid her, and her friends from the book club stopped calling. The isolation that surrounded her was of her own making, and though harsh, it was necessary. At the hospital, Maria began to wake. I held her hand, the connection between us stronger now, forged in the fires of what we had endured. We'll get through this, I promised, my voice steady, a vow not just for the present, but for the future and our growing family. The decisions we faced were difficult, distancing ourselves from Eleanor. But they were necessary. Our focus was on healing, on rebuilding. Eleanor's choices had led her down a path of loneliness and regret, and as hard as it was to accept, we had to move forward. For us, for our child, for our future. In the quiet sanctuary of our home, Maria's strength amazed me. Though she was still recovering, her resolve was clear. We can't let her hurt anyone else, she said, her voice firm with determination. Together, we crafted a plan to bring Eleanor's actions to light. We reached out to a well-known local journalist, one known for her integrity and commitment to social justice. Over the phone, Maria recounted our story, her voice steady but heavy with the pain of betrayal. The journalist was intrigued and sympathetic, agreeing to meet. Preparation for the interview became our shared mission. We gathered the hateful letters, documented Maria's injuries, and collected messages of support from neighbors and acquaintances who had witnessed or experienced Eleanor's prejudice. Our friends Mike and Jenna stood by us, helping us organize the evidence. You're doing the right thing, Jenna said as she helped sort through emails. Mike nodded in agreement. It's time her true colors were shown to everyone. The day of the interview arrived. Miss Hammond, the journalist, set up her recorder in our living room, her demeanor professional yet compassionate. Maria spoke first, recounting the incident, the discovery of the letters, and the impact of Eleanor's actions on our lives. I followed, sharing my perspective, my voice heavy with the weight of a son's betrayal. I never imagined my own mother could harbor such hatred, I admitted, the gravity of the situation hanging in the air. Miss Hammond listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that cut straight to the heart of the matter. When the interview concluded, she packed up her equipment and promised, I'll make sure your story is heard. You're not just speaking for yourselves, but for everyone she's hurt. The article went live a few days later, its impact immediate and explosive. Local media picked it up first, and soon after, national outlets followed. Eleanor's racist actions, once hidden behind closed doors, were now exposed for all to see. The community's reaction was swift. People who had once respected her were now her harshest critics. Her reputation, built over decades, crumbled overnight. Eleanor reached out to us, her messages filled with a mix of apologies and pleas for understanding. But the damage was done. Her standing in the community was shattered, her social circles closed off, and the public outrage ensured she could no longer wield her prejudice without consequence. Maria and I watched as the story unfolded, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over us. We had exposed the poison that had festered in the shadows, but it had come at the cost of a family torn apart. Yet, in this newfound quiet, we found our strength. Our commitment to each other was renewed, our bonds unbreakable, and our resolve to protect our family stronger than ever. The weeks following the article were tumultuous, but it was necessary. Eleanor, once a respected figure in our community, now faced the harsh reality of her actions. Neighbors who once greeted her with smiles turned away in disgust. Unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with her revealed prejudices. Her friends distanced themselves, unwilling to endure the social ostracism that came with being associated with her. She eventually put her house on the market, the forlorn for sale sign standing stark against the manicured lawn, a symbol of her precipitous fall from grace. Amidst these upheavals, Maria and I made a decision for our future. We packed our belongings, hearts heavy but hopeful, and moved to a new city, one celebrated for its diversity and inclusive spirit. Here, we found open arms and welcoming hearts, a community that accepted us without hesitation. Our neighbors celebrated the richness of diversity, understanding that the fabric of a community is strengthened by its varied hues, not in spite of them. Inspired by our experiences and the lessons we had learned, Maria and I became advocates for racial tolerance and family safety. We spoke at community centers and schools, sharing our story, not to reopen old wounds, but to prevent others from enduring similar pain. Our message was clear. Hate, if allowed to fester, can destroy families and communities, but awareness, empathy, and proactive kindness can heal and protect. As our new life took root, we welcomed the birth of our child, a beautiful, healthy baby boy. Holding him in my arms in the quiet of the nursery, with Maria resting beside me, I felt the weight and lightness of our journey. In this peaceful room, with the soft hum of a city that embraced all, I reflected on the painful but necessary path we had walked. Cutting ties with my mother was the hardest decision I had ever made, but as I looked down at my son, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful slumber, I knew it was the right one. We had chosen a future where love wasn't bound by blood or biased by heritage. A future where our son could grow up, knowing that his worth wasn't tied to the color of his skin, but to the content of his character. In this new beginning, I found closure. The pain of the past, while not forgotten, was now overshadowed by the joy of the present and the promise of the future. We had stepped away from the toxicity to protect what was most precious: our family, our future. As our son grew, he would learn of our journey, not as a tale of sorrow, but one of strength, of the unyielding power of love over hate. In the quiet moments between the soft coos and gentle smiles of our child, Maria, and I shared a look of deep understanding. We had weathered the storm and, in its wake, found not just survival, but life, thriving, unabashed, and unafraid. Now that our story has come to a close, I leave you with a question. Do you believe cutting ties with family is justified if it means protecting your own? It was not a decision David and Maria made lightly, and it's a reality many might face under extreme circumstances. What would you do in their shoes? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Hey, I'm Andy. I'm 22, in college, and yeah, I've got a prosthetic leg. It happened after an accident when I was a kid, but I never let it hold me back. I work hard and try to stay positive, you know. Anyway, my brother Leo is graduating soon from this prestigious university. He's always been the golden child, straight A's, athletic, the whole deal. Me, I'm just the guy with the fake leg he's embarrassed to be seen with. Last week, I was helping Mom hang streamers for Leo's graduation party. Dad was outside grilling, and the smell of burgers was already in the air. Andy, can you grab the plates from the pantry? Mom called out. Sure thing. I shouted back as I headed into the kitchen. But just as I got close, I overheard Leo talking in a low, angry voice. Mom, Dad, We need to talk about the party. I stopped in my tracks, curious. What about it, sweetie? Mom asked. I don't want Andy there, he said. The silence that followed felt suffocating. My heart dropped. What do you mean? Dad asked, his voice tense. I don't want people staring at his prosthetic leg. It's my day. I don't want anything to ruin it, not even him. It felt like a punch to the gut. Was that really how Leo saw me? Leo, that's a horrible thing to say, Mom gasped. It's the truth. I've worked hard for this. Can't I have one day where I'm not just the guy with the disabled brother? Leo said coldly. Son, you can't exclude your brother, Dad replied, but there was no strength behind his words. Please, just this once, Leo pleaded. Tell him he has a doctor's appointment or something. Silence stretched, and I knew what was coming. Fine, Mom sighed. But this is the last time, Leo. You need to be kinder to your brother. I backed away from the door, my heart racing. They were going to lie to me, exclude me from my own brother's party, because I embarrassed him. I felt tears prick at my eyes as I made my way to my room. How could they do this? How could Leo be so cruel? But I wouldn't let them see how much it hurt. I'd smile, act normal, and pretend I never heard a thing. That's what I've always done. Stay positive. Never let them see me sweat. But this time felt different. This betrayal cut deep, and I didn't know how I'd bounce back from it. As I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, I wondered how much longer I could keep pretending everything was okay, and whether I even wanted to anymore. When the day of Leo's graduation came, I couldn't bear the thought of facing my family's lies. As they rushed around getting ready, I dragged myself to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. Andy, honey, are you feeling all right? Mom called through the door. Not really, I croaked, hating myself for playing along with their lie. I think I caught a bug or something. Oh no, she sighed. Do you need us to stay home? No, you guys go. It's Leo's big day, I replied. I heard them leave, the front door clicking shut behind them. As soon as their car pulled away, I texted Mia. Within minutes, she was at my door. All right, spill, she said, flopping onto my bed. What's really going on? I told her everything. The conversation I overheard, the exclusion, the lies. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Andy, that's messed up. You can't let them get away with this. What am I supposed to do? I asked, frustration seeping into my voice. Confront them. All of them. Make them face what they've done. Hours later, I heard the car pull up. Mia squeezed my hand as my family came through the door. Andy, we're home, Mom called. In here, I replied, my voice steady. They walked into the living room, their smiles fading when they saw Mia and me waiting for them. What's going on? Leo asked, suspicion in his voice. Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing, I said, standing up. How was the graduation, Leo? Sorry I couldn't make it. Must have been nice not having your brother there. The color drained from their faces. Andy, we can explain. Dad started. Explain what? I cut him off. How you lied to me. How you excluded me from Leo's graduation because he's ashamed of me. You weren't supposed to hear that, Leo muttered. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to schedule my eavesdropping better next time, I snapped. How long have you felt this way, Leo? How long have I been a burden to you? You don't understand, Leo said, his voice rising. Do you know how hard it's been, always being known as the guy with the disabled brother? Watching people's faces change when they find out. Leo. Mom gasped, but I raised my hand to stop her. No, let him finish. I want to hear this. It's always about you, Andy, Leo continued, years of resentment pouring out. Poor Andy. Brave Andy. What about me? What about what I want? What you want? I laughed bitterly. You've always gotten what you wanted. The grades, The scholarships, the perfect graduation. Was it worth it? Was throwing your own brother under the bus worth it? Andy, please. Mom said, tears in her eyes. We didn't mean. Save it. I cut her off. I'm done. I'm done pretending everything's okay when it's not. I'm done being the family secret you're all ashamed of. I grabbed the bag I'd packed earlier and headed for the door. Where are you going? Dad called after me. Anywhere but here. I didn't look back as Mia, and I drove away, my phone buzzing with messages. News travels fast in a small town, and our family drama was already making the rounds. One of those messages was from Leo's girlfriend, Sarah. She was disgusted by what she'd heard and was done with him. But I couldn't bring myself to care. All I could think about was how my own family had betrayed me, and how, for the first time, I had stood up for myself. It hurt like hell, but for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Living with Mia was like a breath of fresh air. No more walking on eggshells, no more feeling like a burden. I threw myself into my studies, determined to prove, not just to my family, but to myself, that I was more than just the guy with a prosthetic leg. One day, Mia suggested I check out a support group for people with prosthetics. Might be good for you, she said. Meet some people who get it, you know. Reluctantly, I went. And man, am I glad I did. That's where I met Emily. She was a law student volunteering there, passionate about disability rights. The moment I saw her, I was smitten. First time here? She asked, smiling warmly. That obvious, huh? I replied with a chuckle. We got to talking, and before I knew it, we were grabbing coffee after the meeting. Emily was different from anyone I'd ever met. She saw me, all of me, not just the prosthetic. You've got a unique perspective, she said one night over dinner. Ever thought about turning that into a career? I hadn't, but Emily's words planted a seed. Maybe I could make a difference for others like me. While my life was looking up, Leo's was falling apart. Karma's a thing. Turns out someone at Leo's graduation party overheard his cruel comments about me. And that someone happened to be the daughter of a scholarship committee member. An anonymous tip made its way to the committee, and suddenly Leo's future wasn't looking so bright. I found out from Mom, who called me in tears. Andy, it's Leo. They're reviewing his scholarship. He's not handling it well. I felt a twinge of guilt, but it quickly vanished when I remembered Leo's words. That's not my problem, Mom. He's drinking, lashing out at us. Please, Andy, can't you talk to him? No, I said firmly. I can't fix this for him. The investigation into Leo's behavior was thorough. It wasn't just about what he said about me. Former classmates came forward with stories of his discriminatory behavior. It was like once the floodgates opened, there was no stopping it. Then things got even worse. The university started questioning Leo's academic integrity. Apparently, there were suspicious patterns in his work. I couldn't help but wonder if Leo had been cutting corners all along, banking on his charm to see him through. Emily kept me updated on the legal side. It's not looking good for him, Andy, she said one night as we cuddled on the couch. The university takes this kind of thing seriously. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of emotions I couldn't quite name. He made his bed, I said finally. Now he has to lie in it. The verdict came down like a hammer. Leo's scholarship was revoked, his degree was under review, and his reputation was in shambles. News spread quickly through academic circles. Leo, once the golden boy, had become a cautionary tale. Mom called again, her voice pleading. Heed your brother, Andy. Please. He stopped being my brother the moment he decided I was too embarrassing to be seen with. I replied, surprised at the steel in my voice. I hung up, and Emily wrapped her arms around me. You okay? She asked softly. I took a deep breath, realizing that for the first time in a long while, I truly was. Yeah, I said. I think I am. The old me might have felt guilty, might have rushed to Leo's rescue. But not anymore. I was done being the family scapegoat. It was time for Leo to face the consequences of his actions, just like I've faced mine every day since losing my leg. As Emily and I settled in to watch a movie, I couldn't help but feel like this was the beginning of something new, something better. And for once, I was excited to see where life would take me. Graduation day arrived, but this time, I was the one crossing the stage. As I accepted my diploma, I caught sight of Emily in the crowd, beaming with pride. I had done it. Graduated with honors. A few weeks after everything, I landed a job at Tech Access, an inclusive tech company. We need perspectives like yours, my new boss had said. That's when the idea hit me, an app to help people with prosthetics navigate daily challenges. I poured my heart into it, spending late nights in endless coding sessions. When it finally launched, the response was overwhelming. "Andy, you're trending," Emily exclaimed one morning, shoving her phone toward me. The app was making waves, and suddenly, I was being called an advocate for disability rights. As my star rose, Leo's life continued to fall apart. His degree had been officially revoked. It turned out those suspicious patterns were full-blown cheating. He couldn't find work, and his reputation was in tatters. Leo moved back home, a bitter shell of his former self. One night, as Emily and I were celebrating the app's success, my phone buzzed. Leo's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then declined the call. "He's been trying to reach out," Emily said softly. I shook my head. Too little, too late. To their credit, my parents had come around. Mom called regularly, genuinely interested in my work. "We're so proud of you, Andy," she'd say, her voice tinged with regret over the past. Even the extended family rallied around me. Suddenly, I was the success story, the one they'd bragged about at gatherings. It was a strange feeling, but not unwelcome. Then came the family reunion. I almost didn't go, but Emily convinced me. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of," she reminded me. We were barely through the door when I heard Leo's slurred voice. "Well, if it isn't the golden boy," he sneered. The room fell silent as Leo stumbled toward me, reeking of alcohol. "Come to show off your fancy app, your perfect life." "Leo, that's enough," Dad warned. "No, let him talk," I said calmly, meeting his gaze. "What do you want, Leo?" "I want my brother back," he shouted. "I want forgiveness. I've lost everything because of you." I took a deep breath. "No, Leo. You lost everything because of you, your choices, your actions. I've moved on. I suggest you do the same." "You sanctimonious prick," Leo snarled, lunging forward. Uncle Mike quickly grabbed him, holding him back. "I think it's time you left, Leo," Mom said firmly. As they escorted him out, I felt Emily's hand slip into mine. She squeezed gently, and I squeezed back, grateful for her unwavering support. The next year flew by in a whirlwind of success and personal joy. Emily and I got engaged, and now, as I stood on stage at a disability rights conference, I saw her in the front row, her hand resting on her growing belly. "Our app has helped thousands," I said into the microphone. "But we're just getting started. There's so much more to do." As I spoke about resilience and self-acceptance, I couldn't help but think of Leo. Last I heard, he was working as a janitor, still bitter and alone. Part of me felt sad for him, but I knew I couldn't fix his life for him. In the end, I concluded, looking out at the sea of faces, it's not about overcoming disability. It's about embracing who we are, all of us, and demanding that the world make space for us. Because we belong here, just as we are. The applause was deafening, but all I could see was Emily's smile. As I stepped off the stage and into her embrace, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly completely whole. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Andy made the right choice by refusing to forgive Leo? Or should he have given his brother another chance? How far should family loyalty extend when someone has repeatedly hurt you? Share your thoughts in the comments below.